Forest Trust Lands Advisory Committee. Today being February 18, 2022, time being 2:01 p.m. I want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate it very much. I know it's a Friday afternoon before a 3-day weekend. Again, that's why it's terrific to have all of you here today. So let's go through introductions. I don't have my sheet in front of me, so you're going to have to bear with me here. Let's first of all, the board members for Ftlac. Can we introduce ourselves? Let's start with Clatsop County.
Courtney Bangs, Clatsop County Commissioner.
I see Courtney, how are you? And again, I'm Dave Yamamoto, Teluma County Commissioner, but I believe I saw Erin Scar. Oh, seems like she has left her desk for a moment. I think I see her picture. And this is where I'm going to get confused. Columbia County.
Good afternoon, Margaret Magruder, Columbia County.
Thank you so much. And Coos County.
Maine, representing Lane, Douglas, Coos, Josephine, and Klamath.
Thank you so much. And I believe we have Will Tucker, Commissioner Tucker.
Yes, Commissioner Will Tucker from Lynn County, representing Lincoln, Benton, Marion, Polk.
Thank you very much. So I also want to make sure that we get all of the other commissioners on the line, and this is going to be where I'm going to fall down because I don't have my list in front of me. So again, let's start with Clatsop County. Who else do we have from Clatsop County? I see Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Thompson, representing the southern half of Clatsop County.
Thank you so much. Any other commissioners from Clatsop? How about Columbia? Any other commissioners from Columbia? And so this is where I am going to fall down because I don't have my list. What trust county comes after Columbia County? Anybody help me there? I don't see Drenda on the line. Oh, Drenda is here.
I'm here. Clackamas.
Okay, so
perfect.
Do we have any commissioners from Clackamas County? Who's next, Drenda?
Washington County.
Well, okay, that's not the list. That's
I'm going by the
position. Who do we have from Washington County?
Cameron's here from Marion County.
Thank you, Commissioner Cameron. Thank you so much. Brenda, who's next?
Lynn County.
I know we have Commissioner Tucker. Anyone else from Lynn County? And next?
Benton.
Anyone from Benton County? Next?
Polk.
Polk County? Okay.
Lincoln County.
Anyone from Lincoln? Okay.
Lane.
Anyone from Lane County? No.
I think you already did Coos County.
Well, we've got Commissioner Maine, but yeah, so okay. So John, where are you?
And I'm on the phone. I'm trying to get my Surface Pro to allow me to get into the meeting. I'll stay on the phone until I figure out whether I can get on.
That's why I didn't see you there. Perfect. So
that's why you didn't see me. Yeah.
Commissioner Sweet is Vice Chair of Ftlac and Council of Forest Trust Land Counties. Any others from Coos? Okay, next. Douglas County. I see Commissioner Freeman.
Good afternoon, everybody. Tim Freeman representing all of Douglas County, likely the largest forest trust county, and certainly arguably the best.
I'm not going to go there, Tim. I'm not. I'm just going to say, okay, that's fine. Anyone else from Douglas? Who's next?
Klamath.
Klamath County. Next.
Josephine.
Do we have anyone from Josephine County? Quite a few participants here. Apparently not. Next.
That I think is the list.
Those are the 15 counties. Thank you so much. So I do see that we have some Board of Forestry members with us. I didn't see online, but do we have Jim Kelly with us? Do we have Chair Kelly?
Yes, you do.
There he is. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much. I saw Carla Chambers on. Carla?
Yes, welcome. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. And I also saw Ben Dumling on. Ben?
Good afternoon. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Do appreciate it. And I think I saw Joe Justice on. Joe?
Yes, good afternoon.
Perfect.
Great to be here.
Thank you for being here. And you'll excuse me, I haven't gone through the list lately. Do we have any other Board of Forestry members online with us?
Commissioner, this is Jim Kelly.
Sure.
I am realizing that we have 4 of the Board of Forestry. And so I'm going to have to politely, that gives us a quorum. So I'm going to have to politely ask for a volunteer who wants to perhaps watch this later on video. So I'm looking for somebody to put their hand up.
So Mr. Chair, if I may, yeah. Counties do this all the time. As long as you have noticed this meeting, normally that takes care of the quorum issue. Although again, I will leave that up to you though, sir.
I'm sorry, they're kind of all over us on this issue. The department is. If I know Ben wanted to attend, but he was also willing to watch it on video. So
I'll be happy to watch it tonight. As soon as the YouTube is posted, I'll watch. But hello everybody, and I'll see you next time.
Chair Kelly.
Thank you, man.
Commissioner Yamamoto, Board Member Dumling. So even though you do have a quorum present, as long as you the meeting has been properly noticed, and as long as you're not deliberating towards a decision, you should be good to go. And I would expect the video to be posted probably early next week.
Well, you're speaking for the department, so that's great. If you can assure me that, then no problem. Well, I'll stay with you.
So, Chair Kelly, that's how the counties work this all the time. We were just at a meeting earlier today, all 3 of us, and as long as we have noticed the meeting, then we're able to do that. So I appreciate that. But again, I will leave this up to you, Chair Kelly.
Okay, I'm good. We're good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I saw Cal online. Cal Mukamoto.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Great. Thank you for being here. And Kate Skinner.
Good afternoon. I'm here.
Thank you so much. And Kate, can you want to introduce your staff that you have online today?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. So I'm going to reintroduce myself too, because I think the last time we met, Liz Dent was still our division chief. So Liz has retired and accepted a different job. And so I'm acting State Forest Division Chief for right now. So with me today is Mike Wilson, who's our Deputy Division Chief for Policy.
Good afternoon, Mukamoto, members of the committee and State Forester Mukamoto. Glad to join you.
Thank you, Michael.
And then Ron Zilli, who's our Deputy Division Chief for Operations.
Good afternoon, Chair Yamamoto and everyone. Ron Zilli, Deputy Division Chief of State Forest Planning.
Great of you to be here. Thank you.
We also, I think I saw Kyle Abraham, our Deputy State Forester. Are you still on here, Kyle? Yeah.
Yes, good afternoon. Kyle Abraham, Deputy State Forester. I think I'm in my 3rd week, so thank you. I'll have to duck out at about 2:30, but I should join again after that.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much.
Andy White, the Northwest Oregon Area Director is here.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's sunny Friday afternoon. Once again, Andy White, Northwest Oregon Area Director out of Forest Grove.
Thank you.
And Nick Palizzato, are you here? I'm sorry. Looking around the board here.
I know.
Yep, I'm here. Good afternoon. My name is Nick Palizzato. I'm the Resource Support Unit Manager in the State Forest Division.
Thank you.
All right. And Robbie LaFleur, you're our assistant to the area director for Northwest.
Hey everybody, Robbie Lefebvre, Assistant Area Director for Northwest, working for Andy. Probably saw this used to be Don Evernham's old job, so that's the position I'm filling in now. So I've interacted with you much the way Don did in the past.
All right, District Foresters. I saw Dan Goody, our District Forester in Astoria.
Morning all, Dan Goody in Astoria, enjoying the sun.
Michael Curran in West Oregon.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Ola Buck down in Western Lane.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ola Buck, Western Lane District Forester.
I think that's all the
Thank you for
district
being here.
foresters joining us today. And then also Bodie Dowding is on.
Hello, Bodie Dowding, Forest Management Plan Project Lead. It's nice to be with you all again.
Thank you.
And then our advisor, Jason Cox of Public Affairs, is also here.
Hi, thank you, and apologize for not introducing myself earlier for the record.
Perfect.
All right.
So I must say ODF does not travel light. we appreciate everyone here. We do very much. I've got just a couple more introductions. Mark Rasmussen. Mark.
I'm Mark Rasmussen with Mason, Bruce, and Gerard.
Mark, thank you so much for being here. And again, I know you're going to be retiring within a year or so, but as always, we need you. And how about Mike Buffo? Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mike Buffo, Senior Forest Economist with Mason, Bruce, and Gerard.
Thank you, Mike. And I must say, you're coming on strong. You just stepped into the position. You're working well, and we appreciate that so much. One other, Drenda Howitt.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everyone. Drenda Howitt. I'm the staff for the Council for Forest Trustland Counties and also Association of Oregon Counties.
Perfect. So, and this is the part I hate because I know I forget people. So who might have I forgotten, or have we had any other commissioners join us?
This is Commissioner Scar from Teluma. I don't know if you called me when I stepped away for a moment, but I'm pleased to be here.
I did. All we saw was a blank desk, but thank you, Commissioner Scar, for being here. Appreciate that very much. Okay, anyone else?
Commissioner Yamamoto, this is Gina Nickel, the Association of Oregon Counties Executive Director. And I am pleased to be here.
Thank you for being here, Gina. I didn't see you initially, so I apologize. But you and I were on the same flight back from DC, and I'm sure you did not get home any earlier than I did. But thank you for being here.
You bet.
Anyone else? Perfect. Okay, moving on. Do we have any public comments? Public comments going once.
Laura Wilkeson is.
Yeah, Laura, I'm sorry. I just saw your hand pop up. Laura.
Thank you. Yeah. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes and actually share my screen, if that's okay, and run through some indirect economic impacts that I know you guys are going to be talking about, how the counties distribute revenue today and how those go to the local taxing districts. But I thought maybe a perspective on where some of the other revenue activity comes through in terms of timber harvest and manufacturing might be helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Thank you for that. And yes, we do have that on our agenda, county revenue and distribution. So this is perfect timing.
Great. Thank you. Okay. All right. Is that coming through?
Yes, we see it. Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'll walk through this handout here. And I did also share this with Drenda, so she can share it with the commissioners as well, so you guys will get a copy of it. So again, this is from Hampton Lumber. So the very top kind of talks about the overall state harvest from FY21. So the 260 million board feet that was harvested last year generated 142 million. This is what the counties receive in their annual report every year. But you can see the breakdown when you actually add the other economic impacts into this, that it, over $120 million extra in logging, hauling costs, road construction, the mill wages, sales, trucking, all of that. And you can kind of see the breakdown there of how that gets distributed out. And really that local residents gets a big chunk of that. And so, the 142 million goes a lot farther than just what is distributed out directly in payments to ODF and to the counties. And then if you want to get even kind of further down into specifics, so Hampton purchased 71 million board feet of that 260 last year. We paid just under $30 million in stumpage. When you add in those same costs for logging, road building, landowner payments, all of that, it more than doubles it. It goes up to just under $70 million just from those Hampton activities. And then that kind of feeds into the next part of this, which is what that means for our operations at our mills. And so we've got mills in Wilmina, Banks, Tillamook, and Warrenton, and that stumpage and that harvest kind of equates to these different weeks of work. And so you can see there, Banks especially, it's a small mill that we have out there in Washington County. It relies heavily on ODF timber, and so you can see how much extra work that they get just from those sales that we've purchased. Other interesting thing to note too is, as you guys know, not all of the log becomes a dimensional piece of, lumber, a 2x4, have you. So we do work with about 17 other companies to distribute those residuals. So those kind of extras, sawdust, bark dust, stuff that goes to plywood, paperboard, all of that. So those are another 17 customers that have employees of their own that are also generating revenue in their communities. And then our finished product specifically, so this is metric tons of carbon stored, just under 300,000. That equates to about 63,000 cars driven every year. That's just what's stored in our products from those ODF sales. So that's a pretty decent chunk of what those car emissions would be just from our 71 million board feet. And then you can see the homes that could be created from those ODF harvests as well, just about 7,500 homes. And so more specifically, again, to what Hampton does, so we have about 75 small family-owned businesses that we work with that work specifically on ODF sales that we purchased last year. You can see in this word cloud here where the majority of them come from. So Tillamook County Commissioners, you guys take the cake there. But Clatsop County is not too far down, and really almost everybody on this call has a piece of this. This again is just Hampton, and then we employ contractors to do logging, hauling, road construction. So there's about 17 of them that we partner with really on a day-to-day basis. They've got just over 400 employees there. And then they also have subcontractors. So, 61 subcontractors. You can see the list there, different trucking and timber falling, road building, all of that. So I hope that provides a little bit of a perspective outside of just what the department sales are, and really that economic activity that comes from timber harvest from ODF sales and the purchasers that buy those timber sales. So I'm going to unshare my screen if I can figure it out, and hopefully I can do that.
Thank you for that, Laura. We do appreciate that so much. We do.
Okay.
These are important numbers.
Great. Oh, here we go. Stop share. Sorry, I'm not good at on Zoom. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Do we have any other public comments? Hearing none, let's go to comments from the Board of Forestry Chair, Chair Kelly. Chair Kelly, I believe you're muted.
There we go. Got it right.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very impressed that we have the ODF so well represented, the board so well represented, but I'm particularly impressed to see the county so well represented. So congratulations on such a well-attended meeting. Just want to comment on two things on your agenda today. And one of them is carbon. you know, I just want to make sure that everybody knows, you know, in the not too distant past, we were presented with some new information relative to carbon and the trends on carbon on the state forests. And that was pretty surprising information. And I think we certainly are looking at that very carefully and making no assumptions at this point as to whether that information was entirely accurate. So we know it's important and certainly an issue that all of you are going to pay a lot of attention to, the public could pay a lot of attention to. So we're just stepping very carefully without, as again, rushing to judgment on that. So I've asked our two board members who I think are most qualified to really dig into this, Joe Justice, who is with us, and Brenda McComb. Both of them have the kind of backgrounds that they really, where it's a little bit easier for them to understand all this modeling and all. So they're deep in that. I don't know, you know, we're nowhere near any kind of conclusions and probably won't be for a while, but just want you to know that's the approach at this point. And then I just really appreciate since you know we had some of us been saying that we were really interested in what these dollars fund in the counties. Really appreciate that you guys have taken our interest seriously and are addressing that. So thank you, and thank you for the short little presentation we saw in Hampton. This is all, you know, information that's important for us to have out there and balance with all of the other information that we struggle to deal with. Anyhow, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Appreciate that very much. And let's also have some words from Teluma Komodo, our state forester. Kel.
Thank you, Chair Yamamoto. I appreciate the invite to come and speak to the group and the committee.
Great to see you.
What's keeping us busy? A lot of things are keeping us busy at the state. First off, in 762, we on February 16th, we announced the awards of grants for fire resiliency projects, landscape. They went to 9 different groups, about $20 million, over 156,000 acres. And these groups brought about $15 million in matching funds. So that went along. Our next stop on the 762 venture is to define the WUI. And we are waiting to hear some more expertise, and we'll be looking at that next week and hopefully coming up with some sort of determination for that. Also, along on the front is the fact that on November 15th, the day I was hired into the department, Biden signed the infrastructure bill, and we are now we've been planning with the Forest Service, BLM, and NCRS, as well as other state agencies, on how to deal with that. And we had a long meeting today. We are starting to identify acres on the ground. We have a man by the name of Nathan Beckman who works in our planning division. He's putting together a 20-year plan, and we'll be working with the federal agencies also and how we can best leverage the investments the state put into 762. Along this week, we spent a lot of time on fire financing. And as you know, the agency has seen a tremendous growth in fire costs since 2013. In 2019, not so bad, but then, you know, all the other years have been bad. Prior to 2013, we probably averaged about $10 million, which is our base budget, but now we're talking about gross fire costs of $134 million. We pay for that basically with a base budget that pays for the fire department, you know, and then severity, which is additional measures we take. And beyond that, there's the large fire costs. And then on top of that, we have an insurance program. So we have on the insurance program with Lloyd's of London, I like that we're insured by Lloyd's of London for the last 49 years. I think 2 years were inactive, so technically 47 years. We have a $50 million deductible once we get into that large fire funding. And then beyond that, they'll reimburse us for 25 million. So we made a pitch to Lloyd's of London to re-up that. And I didn't fly to London, thank goodness.
I would have gone.
Yeah, I know. In the past, people have flown to London for this. But I was actually quite relieved I didn't have to fly to London because I got too much to do. I can't sit on a plane for that long right now. Jim, you got to help me with that. Anyway, yeah. So we made Zoom. We talked to a couple of sets of underwriters from Lloyd's of London. We were told to dress up. So, you know, I know that at least all of us had ties and coats and ties and nice dress on top. I'm not sure what they were wearing below that, maybe gym shorts. But with the help of the staff, Mike Shaw, and also Brennan Geroltz, who works for Lone Rock Timber Company. He's a citizen volunteer as chair of our Emergency Fire Costs Committee, and he puts in a lot of time. And Mike Shaw took the bulk of the presentation. I just introduced them. This is a great thing about being state forester. And they took the bulk. And it's interesting because of the randomness of the fires and so on. We're going to have to see how the underwriters look at this and the growing costs. Related to that, this week we kicked off the task force for emergency fire funding. And this is a task force that I convened that will give me some recommendations concerning two purposes. One is, how do we get to a long-term sustainable financing of the department with large fire costs? You know, as you guys know, as the fire costs have increased, we increasingly have to finance the cash flow of those by basically what I say, robbing Peter to pay Paul, taking money from the stumpage dollars we get off of state lands. We always prioritize paying the counties, however, and then transferring them to cover those costs or other parts of the program. And the issue is that it's cash flow timing. But, you know, in business, as all you know, if you don't have cash at the right times, there's no second place for not having cash. And so what we need to do is figure out how we can cover that. And as the debts have climbed, we have greater and greater debts that we are carrying. And these debts are created largely because we're looking for reimbursement from other agencies, for instance, FEMA, and they can take up to 2 years to be done. First off, it's fairly complicated to put the invoices together, which Bill Herber, our administration director, director is working fast to continuously improve in that area, and he has. But it just takes time to collect those debts. So as they grow, you know, I think 2021, we had a gross fire cost of 134 million. You know, we need that. And then on top of that, the insurance, that $25 million insurance, it takes a long time just to convince Lloyd's of London to open up the coffers and pay us. So we're financing cash flow, and we need to look at a long-term fix for that. And that's what they're going to do. The second purpose of the task force is to talk about the true costs of fire. You know, fire cost is just not the dollars and cents that you record on an invoice. It's also health effects, just a lot of different effects that affect the Oregonians. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit more in this task force. So that is something that I'm looking forward to seeing. We're going to fast track with that. We have to get a legislative concept out this year so we can go into 23, the biennium of 2020, starting in 23, and come up with a legislative concept for that. And finally, I can talk to you about on this thing, but I'm not going to. I want to thank John Sweet. John, are you on here? Well, John Sweet, Commissioner from Coos County. I had interviews for Deputy State Forester, and we hired Kyle Abraham. I think of all of you probably know him. And John participated in my interview committee, and I really want to thank him for his participation for that. So, and with that, Chair Yamamoto, that's my report.
Thank you, State Forester Mukomoto. Appreciate that very much. And I know John is on. I think he's still on. I don't see him logged on, but I think he's still on the phone.
Okay. I will see him in Coos Bay and I'll thank him. Well, I actually already.
She must be close to neighbors, huh?
Well, he lives in a better part of town than I do.
Yeah. Thank you, Cal.
Okay.
So I did get a message that Washington County Commissioner Jerry Woolley was going to join us late, but I do see he is on. Commissioner Woolley, just introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Chair. Jerry Woolley, Washington County Commissioner, District 4, which is basically the western part of Washington County and certainly touches all of the counties that are on this, I believe, at least with the in the northwest corner. So thank you, David.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much. Okay, so next agenda item is approval of our December 3rd, 2021 FTLAC meeting. And what we've done now, instead of putting together minutes, which is time consuming and a dreadful job, we decided that we could use the actual YouTube video of our meeting. So I guess we need a motion to approve that, although I can't see how anyone can make any changes to that video. But I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
Commissioner Tucker, so move.
Okay, Commissioner Tucker.
Commissioner Magruder.
Commissioner Magruder, seconds. Any discussion? Anybody want to object to anything on the video? Hearing none, rather than have everyone say yes, I'll say, do any of the board members have an issue and wish to say nay? Oh, Commissioner Thompson.
Sir, I just wondered, is the agenda attached to it? So if somebody wants to evaluate where to jump into the YouTube to check for content, they don't have to just listen to the whole thing. I know you're fascinating, but somebody might be short on time.
Well, Leanne, we don't want to make it easy on people. Come on, I don't know that. Kate, do we know how we're doing this? Do we have a copy of the agenda with some time? And I know that's more work. I guess we're going to talk to Jason.
I'll push that to Jason. Yeah.
Perfect.
Chair Yamamoto, committee members. So short answer, we don't have it time stamped out like that, but that's something we can certainly look into. Where you might be able to find a good linkage on those is on the actual FTLAC website. We'll be posting the links to the videos, which will also have in the meeting archives, which will also have the link to the agenda. So you can make that connection there, but we haven't gotten to the timestamp linking level just yet.
Understand. Thank you, Jason. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll just ask if any of the board members have a nay. Motion approved. Okay, we're going to move on to our 2:30 agenda item, and this is at the
Commissioner
request.
Yamamoto, may I interrupt you? This is Commissioner Magruder. Commissioner Wise from Benton County is on the line now also.
Perfect. Commissioner, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello and good afternoon. I'm Nancy Wise, Benton County Commissioner and Chair of the Commission this year.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Ben, Jason, you still have your hand up? You want to anything? Nope, hands going down. Okay, so this is our 2:30 discussion. Is going to be from the staff. American Forest and Santium Forest Carbon Project. Commissioner Cameron saw a presentation on this from the department earlier, and he asked me about it, and I had to tell him I didn't know anything about it. So I did talk with Kate, and we're going to hear about carbon sequestration on the forest and how we may get some revenue from those things. So Kate, I appreciate this very much.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it right over to Robbie, who's been working on this the hardest.
Thanks, Kate. Chair Yamamoto. Again, my name is Robbie Lefebvre. I'm the Assistant Area Director for Northwest Oregon. Today, we also have Ben, and there's no way I'm going to get his last name right, from American Forest, and Brian that are going to walk you through a presentation on the carbon project on the Santium. And just kind of a little background with our relationship with American Forest. You know, about 3 days after the Labor Day fires kicked off, they were calling, seeing how they could help. not only state forest, but the entire department. And the first way that American Forest really stepped up for the State Forest Division was providing a $1 million grant to plant 2 million seedlings in the burn area on the Santium State Forest. And then after that, we started talking about this carbon project you'll hear more about. And then, you know, we live on the west side, but last summer on the east side was hit pretty hard with the Bootleg, Cougar Peak, and Pat Meadow fires. That's about 500, 600,000 acres right there. And American Forest has really stepped up over there with the landowners to come up with a long-term restoration plan that's not just for federal forests, but also helping small woodland owners and other industrial landowners out there. And so our relationship with American Forest really has been growing, and I'll let them do a little bit more of a background on them, but that's some of our big projects we have. So Ben and Brian, I'll kick it over to you.
Well, I'll just lead off. Ben and I are going to introduce ourselves, but I just wanted to first say it's a pleasure to be here. We're really excited to talk to you all about this exciting project. So I'm Brian Kittler, Senior Director of Forest Restoration at American Forests. As Robbie was saying, it's been very great to be partnering with ODF and the state of Oregon as a national conservation organization. That said, Ben and I both have strong ties to Oregon. I live in Western Washington County in Cornelius up on Chehalem Ridge. And actually on the Labor Day event, I was up there and I could see the smoke billowing out over the valley. And that was sort of a real moment for me in my career in forestry and forest conservation, where I pretty much knew I was gonna do something related to help the problem for the next, for the foreseeable future, really. So Ben, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, super honored to be here today and to present the details of the project that we've been dreaming up over the past year or so. I'm Ben Rushikoff. I'm the Senior Manager of Carbon Finance at American Forests. Lived in Oregon for the past 5 years, recently moved back down to California, but only after getting my master's at Oregon State in forest economics and policy. So really excited to be working with ODF and the counties and all of y'all on this. Really excited.
All right, Ben, you want to advance to the next slide? All right, so we're going to kick things off. We're going to give a little bit of background about a little bit more about American Forest and our partnership with ODF. Ben's going to walk us through in great depth what exactly we are proposing and talk about its implications for ODF, for the counties, for the state of Oregon. And hopefully we have enough time to have some back and forth Q&A. Next slide, please. So we are the country's oldest forest conservation organization. We started as a citizen-based organization in 1875. And up until the 90s, we were known as the American Forestry Association. So our brand of conservation has always had a very strong tie to forestry and sustainable forest management. It's also had a very strong tie to reforestation. The picture here is a CCC crew from the original Civilian Conservation Corps, the Tree Army, as it was called. We helped establish that corps back in the day, and that sort of public interest mission has been really core to how we go about things in terms of the partnerships that we do and our core mission. In addition to helping kick off the CCC, we did help establish the USDA Forest Service, and more recently we helped secure some of the forestry provisions in the infrastructure law, including an extension of the Forest Service's Reforestation Trust Fund, which is going to bring millions of dollars to help address the federal public lands reforestation backlog. Next slide, please. So our mission is to create and sustain healthy and resilient forests. We do this from city center to mountaintop. We partner with cities like Boston, Houston, Los Angeles, Phoenix to expand urban tree canopy. We also work in large landscape restoration. As Robbie was referencing, our work down in the Klamath Basin really ties in the needs of the local folks in the communities in Klamath and Lake counties, looking at the water situation related to the hydrology of the forest, the wildlife habitat that was lost in the fire, and the climate benefits from bringing the forest back. So our mission is really to partner as a national organization with states, with local governments, with local communities, and other organizations to help advance forest restoration all across the country. Next slide. So specifically, what do we do? Well, we really bridge the science, forest management, and policy spectrum. I sort of referenced some of our policy work in Washington, D.C. We work very closely through coalitions and alliances. We run a national coalition, a broad forest sector coalition around forest climate policy. And that includes several members of the National Association of Forest Owners, forest products companies, as well as conservation organizations. So we're kind of a bridge that can help bring folks together around issues and try to find some solutions where we have common ground. We have place-based partnerships as well. So some of the work that we've done with ODF has included both the funding of seedlings and the work that we're going to talk to you more about today, but also work like we're doing in Klamath and Lake counties, which is pulling folks together to develop a broad restoration plan across a very large area that has been hit heavy by fire. And that includes the science work and the assessment work that we're doing down there as well. Next slide. Over to you, Ben.
There we go. So putting our climate smart forestry model into action, we started engaging with carbon markets and formed the Reforest America Carbon Program because the times really demanded it of us. Our place-based partners like ODF are increasingly faced with huge reforestation needs and insufficient resources to capture that need. So at the same time, corporations and other entities looking to meet their climate change mitigation commitments are eager to support reforestation-based carbon removal projects. So we created the Reforest America Carbon Program. And this Reforest America Carbon Program really creates a mechanism through which companies can meet climate change mitigation goals and offset future emissions by supporting reforestation-based carbon removal projects today. So it unlocks potentially up to $50 billion in carbon finance for our landowner partners like ODF to reforest those areas where upfront costs are highest and most prohibitive. It looks simple because from a bird's eye view, it is rather simple, right? It's just an exchange of project funding and carbon offsets, but I'll get to the inner workings in a few slides. And this slide shows how the Reforest America Carbon Program works in practice. So first, we partner with landowners like ODF that need funding, and we co-design climate-adapted reforestation projects. We estimate and then validate, third-party validate the future carbon storage, and we use that future carbon storage as the basis for forward units. We then sell the forward units to a corporate buyer or any entity that's buying them, and they can claim them against future emissions. But we use that upfront purchase and that revenue to plant trees, fund ongoing monitoring and management and verifications. And once there's enough carbon on the landscape to warrant a verification, that carbon is verified via third-party verification, and the buyer can report it as ex post credits. So at the heart of the Reforest America Carbon Program is the integration of forward units. This graph is illustrating rather simply the accumulation in carbon in a forest over time once it's planted. That shaded triangle, that blue triangle, it represents the additional carbon that is stored via the project, or that blue line, compared to the baseline scenario, which is the red line at the bottom. Traditionally, the carbon buyer purchases ex post credits, which are issued once that existing carbon, once those standing trees have been measured and their carbon volume has been verified. In the forest graph here, that wouldn't happen until year 40. But carbon revenue in year 40 doesn't really help us today when we need that upfront finance to reforest. So we integrate forward units. It changes up that timeline a little bit so that it works to support reforestation. With forward units, the carbon is estimated at the beginning of the project using a methodology, the same methodology. And that carbon estimation is validated by a third party and is issued as forward credits. We negotiate prices today for that carbon, which is assured to be there in the future. And once that carbon is there, it's verified and those forward credits or forward units can convert to ex post credits. The graphs are the same because the carbon is the same. It's really just different timing so that it better aligns with when the costs of reforestation are incurred. I'm going to shift gears and highlight the Santium State Forest Reforestation Project. So we are super excited to be partnering with Oregon Department of Forestry on a 1,000 acre pilot project for post-fire reforestation, carbon financed post-fire reforestation. So as you all know, ODF manages state forest lands for many uses and purposes, and the Santium State Forest in particular is a key watershed that supplies downstream communities with clean drinking water, including Salem. And after a severe stand replacing fire, the soils on site are less stable and they're relatively hydrophobic. So they're prone to erosion, which can add substantial sediment to the very tributaries that flow and provide water to Salem and surrounding communities. So proactively reforesting this site will stabilize the soil, reduce erosion, and help provide that clean water to downstream users. Santium State Forest is also one of the most productive timber areas in the country, home to some very popular recreation trails, and is also super good at storing carbon. Right? This map shows where forest carbon is stored in the United States, and that darker blue in the Cascades and the Coast Range really illustrates that the Santium State Forest and many state forests in Oregon are major carbon sinks in the United States. And of course, in 2020, the Labor Day fires burned over 1 million acres in Oregon. The Beachy Creek fire burned about 16,000 acres of Santiam State Forest, much of which was at high severity, stand replacing levels. And it burned so severely that it's not, many areas are not expected to regenerate naturally without an active intervention. And particularly the project site is on a really steep, low priority site. So it really requires external investment to come in and reforest these acres. This image is from the recent flyovers of Santium State Forest. This is before the fire. That yellow area is the general project area. And this is after the fire. Robbie can correct me on when these images were taken. But note that the areas in the upper right were not included in the most updated imagery. But this project area is part of a much larger fire scar, and that fire scar is going to be reforested over different timelines depending on the different ownerships, right? There's a lot of national forest land which may not be reforested as soon as the industrial or state forest land that was impacted. So it's really going to be a matrix of reforestation timeline. Here's an image from just kind of behind the project area looking out on Willamette National Forest, really showing the scale of the impacts and further illustrating that these landscapes may not regenerate into forests unless we actively go back in and reforest. Additionally, there's high upfront costs. So currently, we're in the scoping phase of this project where we're working with the methodology to estimate the carbon and explore potential project plans. Over the past year, American Forests, we have surveyed the available methodologies and the standards for reforestation and have entered an MOU with Verra, the largest carbon registry out there, to use their reforestation methodology and the associated forward financing mechanism that they're creating. So while the methodology and the forward financing mechanisms are both new, it's expected that both of them will really be the norm moving forward as reforestation-based carbon projects become more common and accepted. And in addition to following, a robust methodology and the requirements associated with it, we're employing conservative carbon accounting principles to make sure that we're not overestimating or overselling the amount of carbon that's going to be expected to be there on the landscape. I also want to note here that in the carbon estimations that I'll be presenting, they're really driven by ODF. Myself and American Forest, we are not designing this project alone. We are working with ODF land managers to come up with the most reasonable and realistic management scenarios and planting scenarios that they would like to see on this landscape. And we're just coming up with the carbon associated with those actions. So this slide broadly illustrates what carbon estimations look like. On the left, at the start of the project, we have the present forest. And this is a photo that I took out at the project site. Severely burned, not regenerating, far from seed sources, no commercial value, and a planting intervention is required. And on the x-axis, we have time. So over 40 years, if we're not actively reforesting this site, it is going to be a understocked future forest with poor timber outcomes and also poor climate and carbon outcomes. So we modeled out the management scenarios that are described by ODF land managers and planners. And those are those other lines on this graph. And the area between those management scenarios and the baseline are what we call the additional carbon, or the carbon associated with the project. I'm just going to describe one scenario today, which is, I've called it the complex structure. We're planting 360 trees per acre and then thinning at age 25. And that additional carbon is shown there in the green shape. This carbon is about 124.7 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent over 40 years per acre. And if we sold that at $12 a credit, that would be about $1,500 in carbon income per acre. At $15 a credit, it's about $1,900 per acre. So across a 1,000 acre project, the carbon income to the project is between $1.5 and $1.9 million. And note that that is equal to the cost to the carbon buyer, right? So ODF is paying $0, Marion County is paying $0. So in many ways, it resembles a reforestation grant, but they're paying for not just planting seedlings, they're also paying for that carbon. So what's included in that carbon, in that price, in that bill to the buyer? Well, they're covering the initial expenses like site prep, planning and logistics, seedlings, labor, registry fees, and insurance. They're also covering ongoing costs, monitoring and reporting and project administration, and also verification costs. So the inventories to calculate the carbon, verification, third-party verifications, and additional registry fees. So I'll note here, these are approximations. And in addition to doing conservative carbon accounting, I've conservatively overestimated some of these costs. But assuming that these costs are about right, it's $1.4 million to the buyer. I'll note that we work with over 200 companies in our traditional donor-based reforestation model. And some of these companies have expressed a lot of interest in Reforest America Carbon Program. And we're working with one buyer in particular to vet this project, and they're really excited. But the bottom line is that the voluntary carbon market is really supply constrained. So it makes ODF is in a good place in terms of the moment to be bringing forward an innovative and really inventive project. I want to highlight here that carbon can be a source of additional income, right? So when our total project costs are about $1.4 million, that means that the break-even price per ton of carbon, assuming that it's about that 124 metric tons per acre, is $11 a ton. This kind of project can sell for between 12 or 15 or even more per ton. And we've conservatively estimated the carbon, conservatively estimated the costs. So at $12 a ton, the project would generate about $150,000 of what I'm calling carbon profits. At $15 a ton, it's $520,000 of carbon profits. And those would be split between the county and ODF. I just want to highlight some of what I view as some of the great implications of this work before opening it up to questions. So first, this project, there's benefits for all Oregonians, right? Restoring this productive, ecologically rich, carbon dense, and beloved landscape is a win for everyone, particularly the local fire impacted communities. I'm thinking specifically of those who rely on Santium State Forest for clean water. This is actively reducing the risk of erosion and sedimentation. So, and those benefits, whereas carbon accrues over time, like those soil stabilization benefits begin pretty immediately. Additionally, it's an opportunity for ODF to show real and meaningful climate leadership in this really innovative and exciting space. So not only would it be the first state agency to do a carbon finance reforestation project, it's one of the first of any kind of landowner in the US. So it's a really exciting place for ODF to be. And to close, it's also a demonstration opportunity. So there's a lot of landowners in Oregon, private, large industrial, small, private, tribal, lots of landowners that are dealing with the exact same problems that ODF is dealing with in terms of having really high upfront reforestation costs and insufficient resources to cover those costs. So ODF is taking this opportunity to demonstrate to those other landowner types across the state that there may be some other options worth exploring to participate in actively reforesting post-fire. So with that, I would like to open it up for questions. And Robbie, if you want to help facilitate that, or whoever, thank you.
Sure. Ben, can you just stop sharing your screen and then we can get everybody on the view? And then the first hand up I saw was Mark Rasmussen.
Thanks. Ben, was this area salvaged after the fire?
No.
And why not? Why wouldn't you choose an area that was salvaged?
Well, I can answer that because if we salvage it, we're required by law to replant it. And so there's no additionality to it, where this was an area we couldn't afford to operate in and do the reforestation costs. And so by getting that additional funding from American Forest and their partners, that's the additionality of the carbon that we're going to be getting.
But you couldn't afford to salvage up there? Is that the problem?
Yeah, it was very steep. There was very little commercial value in those trees to begin with. And then the logging costs and the infrastructure that was damaged during the fire, i.e. the road system mainly, and repairing that road system to level to facilitate log trucks and all the other equipment would have been cost prohibitive 100%.
Yeah, so the scenario that Ben showed that you're working under anticipates a thin at age 30. And if you couldn't afford to salvage those big trees, how the heck are you going to do a thin at age 30 of little trees?
It's a scenario, and there's many different models out there. And I think the money that Ben was talking about there was more based off of carbon and not timber volumes. And so we can go in thin air, and our thoughts are over time, there's probably going to be better technology on thinning. And maybe there's other ways for us to improve the infrastructure up there to get in there. But the money that we're talking about today is all based off of the carbon.
But if you assume that you weren't going to thin, then wouldn't there be more carbon there in 40 years and you get paid more today?
Ben?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we can model out any number of scenarios and look at the carbon implications of those scenarios. It's not the grow only scenario is not one that I presented today, but it is something that we can make available to ODF to consider as well. We're just really here to provide the estimations of the carbon and the carbon revenue associated with any number of management options.
And is this area in an HCA? If there is an HCP, isn't it part of an HCA?
Yep.
Yeah, so you probably won't be out there messing around. I'm just thinking, why not choose a scenario that's going to put more money in your pocket today?
We're really limited on where we could put it, I would say. And
yeah, so why don't you assume a scenario where you don't thin, you have more carbon to sell, because you're probably not going to thin up there if it's in an HCA, and it's too expensive to operate up there. So why not choose the higher scenario, get more money?
I'll let Mike Wilson answer.
Go,
Thanks.
Mike.
Yeah, so that's a very good point, Mark. And so when we actually get to closer to implementation on this project and actually select a scenario to go with, we are considering all those factors. You know, one thing that's very important to us is that we don't take any piece of land and just put it off, you know, put it out of production forever, potential for harvest. However, you're right. If there's a draft HCA involved, then, you know, we need to look at how it dovetails with our other plans and how we can move this forward. And so it would still show additionality just because it would have poor performance under natural regeneration. And, you know, at the end of one of the things that Ben didn't go into here today is there are options at the end of this thing where, see, you've done a 40-year project. Then there's the potential for an additional 40 years. If you want to re-up for that, there's potential to negotiate that as an improved forest management project. And, you know, you could carry this thing to a certain term, and we don't know what's out there after the HCP, which has a 70-year time horizon. And, you know, but the important thing is at the end of any of these scenarios, whether it be 40 years, whether you decide to tack on another 40 years, there's no at that point, there's no prohibition on us harvesting at the end of the day. So,
and Mark, just
a lot of flexibility
to adhere to the timeline, and Commissioner Banks has had her hand up for a while, so I know we've got a lot of other topics. So Mark, if you want to talk more about this, I'd be more than happy to have a meeting with you and Mike and Ben where we can dive into some of this, but just to keep the meeting moving, I'm going to move on to Courtney.
Okay, sometime then I'll want to talk about what happens when the price of carbon goes up, whether you benefit from that or not. Because all projections show carbon prices rising in the future. But don't answer it now. I've taken enough time. Thanks.
So I'm going to be frank. I'm not sure you want to defer to me for more questions. I have 750 million questions that go into this, but I think the first thing is I'm just gonna, you know, Mark started on something, you left snags there. So what, and then you talked about potential harvest in a snag area, and I know to harvesting in a snag area, I mean, it's hazardous. They're not real friendly of allowing your firefighters in snag areas to fight fire. So anyhow, that squirreled me off into another area of concern. I have a lot of concerns. So why would your carbon buyers want to buy carbon that doesn't exist with a promise of carbon existing in 40 years, maybe, unless it burns again? And then when we have other so are you informing us that this is happening, or are you asking us if this is a good idea? I guess that's where I'm at. Like, before I start down this rabbit hole, I want to know, are you informing us that this is the direction ODF is going? Or are you asking us if it's a good idea?
So Courtney, this is Kate Skinner, I'll jump in. So what we wanted to do was share this information with you today. We've talked to Commissioner Cameron about it. And what we wanted to do is let you know what we're looking into, a partnership that might be developing, and also that this is an opportunity that we haven't explored before, and we haven't had an opportunity as a public agency to be part of the carbon market. And so as was described, we have a lot of different scenarios. And so I would say it's informational today. We have a lot of things to figure out still.
Well, and just to come back at that, I'm concerned because I have some awfully beautiful forests out here in my area, in my county, that, you know, have carbon. And if ODF is looking to start selling off our trees or our lands, or however you want to structure this, it feels like money laundering to me. But if you are looking at doing that, my concern is that you're going to start popping out here in Clatsop County and selling off our land or our trees so that we can't harvest them. So that's where I'm circling out to, because I can't figure out why a buyer would want to buy something that doesn't exist on the hope that it's gonna exist. And then it seems like a 40-year contract that is disguised as a potential 80 or 100-year contract. And then it could be like, I'm sorry, I've got a list of questions, and I will see if there's another commissioner that wants to ask any, and before I pop in and ask a few more.
We can circle back and talk offline if you want, Commissioner Bangs, or I'll leave it up to Commissioner Yamamoto about what you want to do with the agenda. But this is for informational sharing today about things that we've been approached about, what we're looking at, and we'd be happy to talk with you and Mark some more offline about some more details.
I think that would be a good idea. Commissioner Tucker, you had your hand up initially. Are you okay? No, I don't see Commissioner Tucker.
So as soon as I raised my hand, my wife's dog grabbed a squeaky toy and ran into the dining room where I'm hiding and started to make it a ruckus with this squeaky toy. So I share concerns. Having said that, boy, am I excited about seeing areas that are difficult to forest being reforested. And if it's a habitat conservation area that we might not be able to manage actively as I would like to see us actively manage, I see those as some win-wins, especially if there's carbon credits that come that are somehow split. My concerns is I would love to see it, make sure that we're really in the exploration stage. And I'd like to be engaged in that exploration stage to answer other questions. I worry, especially in Lynn County, luckily the Beachy Creek fire only impacted me lightly. But having said that, the same wilderness areas, the same managements of the Forest Service above me and above the state forests that are left in my county lead me to worry that this could happen to me next. So, and I think the whole issue about what happens with the next fire, because there is the next fire, when we don't take down those standing dead, if we don't manage the brush and the growth, and we don't get things planted and going again, and getting a canopy that's up there above the floor, we're going to have more fires again. And so I share the concerns. I'd like to be engaged in understanding what and why this would work. I believe it will work. It sounds to me like it does have a good chance of working, but I'd like to make sure we do it in the right places and make sure that we understand our agreements about what to do with those trees at 60 years, 80 years, someplace down the road. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker. In the interest of time, this is going to be the last question. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, sir. I would just ask for long-term economic analysis over the whole landscape with all these scenarios. And I'm talking about the money that comes to counties. I love the idea of replanting trees, especially in areas that really aren't commercially viable. But we counties have to have the money unless you can come up with some other way besides timber revenue to fund our services. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. And to Brian and to Ben, I'm hoping you are open to further conversations with Mason, Bruce, and Gerard and commissioners on this call. If we can get more answers, the more answers we can get, I think the better off we're all going to be in this process. I am, however, going to take a chair's prerogative and ask one question that started with Commissioner Banks. What does happen if this area burns again? What happens to the carbon credits?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
that one? Sure, yeah, I'll jump in there. So there's mechanisms within the carbon markets and within these registries to protect and insure against carbon losses, for example. This is a pilot project and a program that we're creating. And one of the things that we're excited to work on is exactly that, those kinds of insurance mechanisms and things that protect against carbon losses, if you will. So a replenishment pool or some kind of pool where the credits can be pulled from to make whatever purchase occurred whole is one of the ideas. We're working with a lot of folks on this, and a lot of folks have ideas, and many of them are very promising. So that's one thing. The other is building climate adaptation, into our planting plans, whatever ODF is doing to help mitigate the risk of another fire occurring. Wanting to plant a forest today that's going to really succeed into the future.
Thank you for that. And again, I think we do have a lot of questions. So if you are all available to answer questions as we move forward from here, that would be extremely helpful to all the members of the Council of Forest Trustland Counties. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for all your questions.
Thank you for being here. We do appreciate this presentation very much. We do. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Our 3 o'clock, we're just a few minutes late. County revenue and distribution. So I'm going to start this one. And Brenda, can you start our PowerPoint for me, please? Go into presentation mode. There, perfect. Okay, so we had questions from the Board of Forestry members, especially Chair Kelly. The question was, so what do the counties do with their timber revenue? More difficult to answer than I anticipated. So we're going to be presenting today issues that come from Tillamook County. We've got the largest state forest. We make as much money as anyone else in this room. So let's start there. Next slide, please. So the information that we're going to be providing. So the county distribution data is from 6 fiscal years, starting with the 15-16 fiscal year, 16-17, 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, and 20-21 fiscal years. The data for the 2 school districts is, however, only for 2 fiscal years. Difficult to get data from school districts also. And there's a 3rd school district in Teluma County that I wish we had data for, but we were not able to get their information in a timely manner. And the last thing we're going to discuss are going to be the jobs and wage data. Next slide, please, Brenda. So timber revenue primarily supports education in Tillamook County. 66% of timber revenue received by the county goes to our 3 school districts, Tillamook, Nestucca, and Neoconi, while also going to 4-H Extension and Tillamook Bay Community College. The county general fund receives 28% of the timber revenue that we receive from the Department of Forestry. And over that six fiscal year period, that amounted to about $30 million. The remainder of all that money is divided between health and public safety and several other districts, as you can see here. So the ports have a little bit, the North Coast Recreation District has a little bit, our transportation, Tillamook County Transportation District gets some funds, our Soil and Water Conservation District also gets some funds. Next slide, please. So the top recipients, school districts, and again, Tillamook Bay Community College. are the top individual recipients after the county. The county school fund in and of itself is a fund that distributes funds to the school districts on top of the funds the districts receive directly from Department of Forestry timber harvest. And it's interesting to note that these numbers vary, especially from district to district, quite a bit, because there's a very complicated formula. It depends on where in the Tillamook State Forest these harvests come from, and that determines where the money for that particular harvest goes and its distribution amongst all the other special districts. So it's a complicated formula. That's why looking over a 6-year period, I think, makes these numbers a little more understandable. So next slide, please. So this is the Nestucca School District, number 101. It's in South County, and I'll be very honest with you, there's very little state forest land in South Tillamook County, mostly private timberland, BLM, ONC, and U.S. Forest Service. But as you can see here, so in fiscal year 19, Nestucca School District 101 received $1.4 million roughly, county timber revenue. All other sources of revenue for the district, a little over $7 million. That makes their total budget about $8.5 million, of which county timber revenue accounts for roughly 16% of their budget in fiscal year 19. Fiscal year 20, that number went down to just over $1 million. Their budget from all other sources went up, however, almost $8.7 million, which gives them about $9.75 million total budget. So here in this particular fiscal year, county timber revenue for the Nestucca School District was about 11% of that school district's budget. Next slide, please. So the Neocani School District, of all the school districts in Tillamook County, does probably the best when it comes to state timber revenue. They are in North Tillamook County. As you can see, in fiscal year, and the numbers are different. These are the numbers that were given to us by the school district as far as other sources of revenue and total budget. So the years are a little different. Again, here, fiscal year 18, they received a little over $3 million in county timber revenue. All other sources of revenue for themselves, a little over $10 million. That makes their total budget for the fiscal year 18 a little over $13 million. So timber revenue accounted for about 24% of Neocani School District's total revenue for fiscal year 18. For fiscal year 19, they received about $4.3 million in county timber revenue. Other sources of revenue for the district, $10.8 million roughly. Total budget, $15.1 million. So as you can see in fiscal year 19, that $4.3 million accounted for 28% of the Neocani School District's budget. Next slide, please. Nope, no, let's hold up there. Can we go back, please? So because we don't have results for Tillamook School District number 9, we've had this discussion with the Board of Forestry members before about the School Equalization Fund and what that means for schools and what that's going to mean for the counties, for the state. And so I'd like to turn this over to John Sweet to have a conversation about the School Equalization Fund. John?
Thanks, David. Yeah, it seems as though the conventional wisdom is that almost all of the receipts from the county forest trust lands flow to the counties to do with whatever they wish. That's not quite the case. Right off the top, 35%, I believe is the number, of the gross revenues go to fund the Oregon Department of Forestry. That leaves 65% of the funds left over to be distributed to the county and other taxing districts within the county. Now, David just said that when you add together the revenues that go to educational entities, whether it be the various school districts, the K-12 districts, or whether it be the county school fund, which ultimately goes to back to the school districts or to the community college. And I think somewhere in there, the educational service district is included. Those typically run about 60% of the county revenues. So starting again from the top, state gets 35% to help run the Oregon Department of Forestry. Of the remaining 65%, about 60 to 65% of that goes to schools. So 65% of 65%, it'd be, and you're going to have another 35% of the whole that will go to schools. Now those payments to schools offset the state's obligation to support the schools through the program of school equalization. So they, in effect, dollar for dollar, reduce the state's responsibility to fund schools equally throughout the state. So when you add it up together, what goes to the schools and then comes back to the state through state equalization or school equalization, and that which goes directly to the Oregon Department of Forestry, you have 75% of the revenues, of the harvest revenues, the gross harvest revenues from the state forest go to the state, either directly or indirectly. They don't really, all that money doesn't go to the county and just stay there. It impacts the state in a big way. If there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to respond.
Questions on school equalization? Thank you, Commissioner. Courtney Bangs had her hand up, and Chair Kelly will get to you in just a moment. Courtney.
I just did a little bit of brief math with the numbers that you presented here, and at the low side of a reduction at the school district that receiving the least amount of timber dollars, it would be at a 25% reduction, 3 teacher jobs. And for, was it Nestucca? It would be at a 25% reduction, 8 jobs. And I'm just looking at teachers, and if the state can't, you know, pony up the funds in a different manner. But I also wanted to present on the flip side. In Clatsop County, we have a number of timber dollars that goes to Clatsop Care. So not only is it for our children, but it is for our parents and our grandparents.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Chair Kelly.
Yeah, Commissioner Sweet, I'm still trying to, this is going to be a dumb question, I guess. I'm trying to understand, I've heard you make these points before, but the piece that I don't understand, is there a law, county laws or whatever that require you to spend the majority of the funds that you get from the timberlands for schools? You know, where I'm kind of going, I guess it's a cynical place, but which is, why wouldn't you spend it, you know, all that money on other things besides schools if the state was going to backfill with the school equalization formula? Feels like a dumb question, so I think there's probably a smart answer. Can you explain it?
I don't, the smart answer, just a simple answer. Jim, the money is divided up amongst the taxing districts in the same way it would be divided among them were it simply tax dollars. So if in any one given taxing area, the school, the K through 12 school operating levy is, let's say 60 or 50% of all the taxes that are paid, they get 50% of the timber receipts that are left over after the Oregon Department of Forestry takes its cut.
So John,
you don't have a choice in that. That's the way the law works.
So John, this is Commissioner Tucker. I used to be on a school board for many years as well. So these lands back historically were commercial lands, so they got income tax, and we would have gotten income tax, and the income tax is set based upon taxing districts and their rates. When they became part of the land that's now managed by the state, we no longer get income tax, but revenue that comes in is treated the same way as if it was income tax. And I believe it's actually a state, it's in ORS that says we must do that. So we could change the state law, but it is trying to respect the fact that this was money that would have been in our tax base had we been at one time, had we continued to hold these lands as property.
Well, thank you. That's a good explanation. You did use the term income tax occasionally when I think you meant property tax.
Yes.
But
yeah, apologize. Should have been property tax.
That's the basis of why this money is distributed to all the appropriate taxing districts, given wherever, you know, in Tillamook County, there's so much land that one harvest operation might be in one school district and another in yet another school district. But it all goes back to the school districts. And typically, the schools take about 50% of the county's tax collections.
And John, let me weigh in also. So even though, yes, the Tillamook County Board of Commissioners feels very strongly that education is a top priority, it's not that we give money, this amount of money to the school district. This is mandated by state law. We don't make the, well, our treasurer does. She splits it up according to the formula that comes to us from the state. And so that money just gets distributed. If it comes to the county, we immediately write checks to the special districts to whom it belongs.
Chairman Yamamoto, this is Maine.
Hold on just a minute, Commissioner Maine. We have a hand from Carla Chambers that went up. Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. As I recall, there's 151 taxing districts that receive and benefit from these dollars. So while the majority goes to the schools, as you're saying, in Tillamook County, in your example, where the majority supported, you know, Tillamook County, I'm assuming that is support for county sheriff and fire and you know, public health and a whole array. If we know that 151 taxing districts benefit from this, is that a correct assumption?
Well, yes, however, and we're going to get into that next, but departments like the sheriff's office and community development and like that, our court systems, they are not special districts. They do get paid out of our general fund. And we're going to be talking about the Tillamook County General Fund and what percentage the timber revenue that comes to the general fund, what percentage that plays, what percentage role that plays in the county.
I can speak on behalf of Coos County, and all of this, any money we receive from the County Forest Trust land, after we have paid out the shares that go to the other taxing districts, including the schools, is put into our general fund. And that fund is where we get money to pay for public safety, to pay for our clerk, which means paying for voting, to pay for our assessor, which means paying for all the, and tax collection, all of the services that go to provide property tax revenue to all of our taxing districts. It goes to those uses. It's not wasted.
Thank you, Commissioner Sweet. We're going to go to Commissioner Maine, who had a question.
To go on a little further about this whole tax scenario, when the tax dollars go from the timber revenue go to the schools, every dollar that goes to the school, a dollar is withheld by the state, so actually it benefits the state by that same exact amount. The schools don't get any increase in revenue.
Yes. Thank you for that point, and that's absolutely the case. So if we stop timber harvest in state forests, then the money lost in state timber revenue would have to be made up by the state out of the school equalization fund. Yes, exactly.
Correct.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Banks.
Well, I know I sent an email out to all of the the board members regarding Clatsop County and how Clatsop County is funded and where a majority of our timber dollars go. But Ms. Chambers has the right idea in the fact that a lot of our funding goes to our rural county sheriff's department. And it also goes to basically paying staff at the Clatsop County level. We at the county, the actual county, receive about 5 million. And then that's dispersed out. That's the county's sum out of, I think, 22 million last year or over the last year. And please, you know, my numbers are pretty rounded. They're not specific, but the county itself, for just functioning and law enforcement, it's about 5 million. And then the rest of that 22 million is dispersed out to our special districts, transportation, long-term care, ESD, school districts, fire districts. That's one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet. Our rural fire departments are funded this way, and so is Astoria Port. So I just wanted to throw that out there that, you know, the counties, in perspective, receive a small percent. It's our taxing districts that will experience the loss.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. And yes, the services you're referring to, we do refer to those as essential services. These are essential services coming out of our general fund that the residents of Teluma County rely on. So, seeing no other questions at this point, Brenda, can we go to the next slide, please? So this is the Teluma County General Fund as it relates to timber revenue. Again, the 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 fiscal years. So as you can see over these years, over the 6-year period, the timber revenue accounts for somewhere between 20% of our total general fund revenue, and in some years over 40% of our general fund revenue. And again, when we talk things that are handled by our general fund, our #1 general fund expense is the sheriff's office and jail. The jail in particular is a mandated service that we must provide. And if you talk to the residents of Teluma County, the Sheriff's Patrol Division, they would consider that to be mandatory from the Teluma County residents' point of view. So as you can see in fiscal year 2016, almost a little over $4 million went into our county general fund, and that equated to about 22% of our general fund dollars. In fiscal year 17, roughly $4.5 million went into our general fund. And in that year, that accounted to about 28% of our general fund dollars. Fiscal year 18, again, a little over $4 million, probably about 22, 23% of our general fund. In fiscal year 19, $6 million went into our general fund from timber revenue. But in that year, that accounted for over 35% of our general fund revenue. Fiscal year 20, just a smidge over $7 million went into our general fund. That accounted for 40% of our general fund budget. In fiscal year 21, we're back down to about $4.8 million, probably about 28% of our general fund dollars. So these revenues, timber revenues, as you can see, ranging from the special districts to our general fund, this is what really adds to our ability to provide essential services for the residents of Teluma County. Next slide, please, Brenda. So the timber revenue, and I always talk about this also, the timber revenue is less than half of what rural counties rely on when it comes to timber production. In Teluma County, we have over 850 timber-related jobs. in Tillamook County. Average wages for timber revenue jobs exceed $50,000 a year. That means the total payroll that comes to Tillamook County through timber jobs is over $43 million a year. Let's also look at the state of Oregon. The state of Oregon has over 60,000 timber-related jobs. Average wages in the state of Oregon for timber-related jobs is roughly $53,000 a year. Total payroll for the state of Oregon in timber-related jobs, $3.2 billion. So even though the timber revenue is extremely important, the jobs are a larger portion of what we rely on our forests to do for us. We have to remember also, these are family wage and fully benefited jobs. And the benefits are not listed in these numbers at all. Health insurance, retirement plans, just all sorts of things. And really important. Next slide, please. So let's just take a quick look at the comparison of wages between sectors. So, and I've gone over these numbers with you too. So total private sector jobs in Tillamook County, the average wage for the private sector in Tillamook County is about $37,000 a year. That same private sector job in the state of Oregon is $52,000 a year. And yet when you look at forest industry jobs, in Tillamook County, the average forest industry job pays about $55,000 a year. In Oregon, it's about $54,500 a year. Wood products manufacturing. So this is basically mill jobs. In Tillamook County, that mill job pays roughly $59,000 a year. In the state of Oregon, statewide, about $51,600 a year. Truck transportation to haul the logs from the forest to the mills and from mills to market. In Tillamook County, that pays about a little over $47,000 a year. In the state of Oregon, it's closer to $51,000 a year. People tell me all the time, well, Dave, you just need to diversify the economy in Tillamook County. Look how well you're doing in tourism. Well, unfortunately, leisure and hospitality jobs in Tillamook County pay almost $23,000 a year. And in the state of Oregon, about the same. But you have to understand, these are sometimes not full-time, part-time jobs, temporary jobs, hardly ever pay benefits on these things. Next slide, please.
David, could I interrupt for just a second?
Surely. John,
if you go back to that first, the slide you just left, you look down to the bottom and you look at total and private sector average wages for Washington County, which would be the most urban of, I believe, our timberland counties.
Brenda, I think you were there. Go forward one. There.
If you look at the total private sector average wages for Washington County, you see how much higher it is than for all the other counties. So it gives you a pretty good idea how relatively important timber revenues, timber jobs are to rural counties.
Mm-hmm. And so this is basically where we got a lot of our information. And this is here for you to see that most of the rural counties are in the same boat. As John points out, Washington County at the very bottom, their total private sector average wage job is $71,000 a year. Look at Clackamas County, $53,000 a year. Benton County, $48,000 a year. All the rest of them are in the high 30s, maybe into the very low 40s. So as you can see, timber is a big player in the state of Oregon, and it provides the needed income for us to make sure that we can provide services. One of the things when it comes to wages, when the mills and trucking companies and forestry jobs get paid a wage in Tillamook County, there's a multiplier effect. When that money comes to our wage earners in Tillamook County, they spend it at the local grocery stores or the drugstore. And then those workers buy groceries and automobiles. And it just gets rolled over again and again and again in rural counties. That multiplier effect for wages is really tremendous in Tillamook County and in all rural counties. Next slide, please, Ryan. So the HCP and FMP analysis of impacts. So we feel strongly, and we hope the Board of Forestry really considers the following before approving the HCP, the Habitat Conservation Plan, and the FMP, the update to the Forest Management Plan. You know, there are going to be tremendous impacts to county and tax district revenues. And these impacts to the revenues, the impacts to services, the revenue support. And again, I like to call these essential services. The tax collectors, the courts, especially our sheriff's office, so that we can provide public safety. One of the huge issues that I always talk about in Tillamook County, we've got a population of about 26,000 people in Tillamook County. And yet during the summer months, during a 4th of July holiday, it's not unusual for us to have over 130,000 people in Tillamook County. We have to have the services, not based on our population, but based on the number of people that just that flock to Tillamook County to take advantage of what rural counties really have to offer. And number 3, the impacts to jobs, particularly family wage fully benefited jobs, is something that we just cannot put off. So Chair Kelly, I know this is something that you asked for. I'm hoping this is what you wanted, and I'm sorry it's only for one county. There's a possibility we can go to other counties and get some of the same information. My treasurer was a little concerned about me putting these real numbers out there, and we considered just providing you just percentages. But in the end, when I looked at it yesterday, it was imperative that we actually see the numbers that go to the various special districts and the general fund. And I'm hoping this was helpful to you, sir.
Yes, very helpful. Particularly, you know, I don't think we were really seeking a whole lot of detail, but certainly that your one slide there that shows what a percentage is, the percentages for Tillamook County. It's been my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's really, excuse me. Sorry about that. Anyhow, lost my train of thought there, as you can imagine, but anyhow, my understanding has been that really the Clatsop County and Tillamook County are the counties where these timber dollars make the biggest difference by far. So you know, so we're very interested to see what the impact is, particularly for those two counties. So I'd love to see similar numbers for Clatsop County. And my understanding is that, you know, the implication for the budgets of most of the other trust land counties, that it's much less significant. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I also know, you know, that our timber revenues have a history of being pretty volatile, and of course the last few years have been pretty good, both in amount of timber that's been pulled off of there and obviously timber prices. So you know, how does Tillamook County deal with, how did Tillamook County deal with the recession where, you know, this was, you showed us 6 years, but you know, I've seen the numbers on the other side of it, you know, in terms of not specific to Tillamook County, but for the Department of Forestry. And, you know, we were hammered. You guys were all hammered then. How do you manage with such a volatile source of income?
I think we're very fortunate that we don't have many recessions like 2008, 2009 recession. But the way we handle that when we don't have money is, unfortunately, we have to have layoffs. And in today's very volatile job market, if we were to go into a recession today, and have to lay people off after the recession were over, I'm not sure we could hire everyone back. I just don't think we could. Commissioner Thompson, you had your hand up first. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. And the answer, sir, is that we budget conservatively. We take the lowest 15 years and only use that. We create cash reserves. We are blessed to have prudent and frugal public policies. As Commissioner Yamamoto points out, though, these are essential services. So there are trade-offs at the state level and at the county level when we're not able to provide services because we do budget conservatively. But I appreciate your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. I'm sorry, I think I bypassed Carla Chambers, Board of Forestry member. Carla.
Oh, thank you. This is really helpful information. And, you know, a point that I just want to emphasize that really resonates with me being in food processing and farming is, you know, that timber and mill job at $54,000 a year and $58,000 a year on average compared to that recreation or hospitality job at $22,000 a year. You know, it's not just that substantial difference in wages, but the U of O did a study on our business in food processing, and they put a 13x multiplier on us. And that would be true for these mills, probably, I'm guessing 10x. And if anybody has that number, I'm interested in it. Because we have, you know, 400, 500, 600 vendors that support these mills. And so that multiplier, every dollar of revenue, that multiplier is just so critical to these rural communities. And I think that's really valuable, seeing that difference between recreation and versus that timber and mill job. So I just really, you know, appreciate you gathering this information. That's very helpful to us.
Thank you so much, Carla. I appreciate that. Commissioner Banks.
Well, Commissioner Thompson said it very well. We do budget very conservatively, but it has been common knowledge, I guess, because we are such a small community, that if a specific taxing district is going to be getting a good timber sale, often that taxing district is informed about it. It may not be from the county. It could just be through our rumor mill that we have in our small community. But often in those situations, they can buy large equipment, maybe a fire truck that year, or maybe improvements on their buildings that year. And so though the funds ebb and flow, our taxing districts are very aware of that, and they're very conservative in their budgeting. But when they have a really good year, that's when repairs and equipment can be purchased. And so just to kind of give you that roundabout knowledge that yes, Clatsop County, we're very conservative in our budgeting, but when we get one really good year, or there's one really good sale, our small taxing districts are aware, and they're able to do some very like mandatory repairs or upgrades that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. One of the things that happened recently in Teluma County, John, I'll get right to you. Thank you. I see your hand up. So one of the things that happened just this last few months in Teluma County, Fallon Logging in Teluma County closed its doors. And I appreciate very much Kate Skinner reached out to me, although we had already talked to the school districts in particular, that a short-term shortage of dollars may be happening in Teluma County because our major logging company had closed. And their assets are being sold off as we speak. Most of their employees have now found other jobs within the county. I believe the auction for all of the equipment happened recently, and the vast majority of the equipment went to other local companies. So even though we may see a short-term revenue fall off, they still have 3 years from the time of a timber sale to harvest. So we feel that money will be coming in. It's just that this short-term issue here, their revenues may be a little short, and so we did inform all of our school districts of that. These are the kind of things that happen in small counties. Word of mouth gets around pretty well. So we appreciate that. Commissioner Sweet.
Yeah, thank you. Jim asked a great question. You know, how do we get in our counties? How do we get through recessions? I know in our county, it was probably not too many years ago, we had 550 county employees. Our head count right now is 330. That's partly how we get through. And our citizens suffer from that because we just can't offer all the services they need. As far as we have a county forest, it's of 15,000 acres. We don't take our money out of that every year. We take it out. It generates about $3 million profit a year, but that varies anywhere from 2 million to 4 million. We put that money into a fund and we take the money out on a rolling 5-year average to smooth it. Incidentally, our county forest is 15,000 acres. As I said, it generates $3 million of profit a year. We have roughly half that acreage in county forest trust lands. We've had 2 payments from that in the years I've been a county commissioner. One payment was $58, and I think the other was $124,000. And that's from a forest that's half the acreage from which we derive a $3 million a year profit on a sustained basis.
Well, Commissioner Sweet, you've been holding out on me.
Your frustrations.
You're holding out on me. You always talk about that $58 check you received from the state. You didn't tell me about that $124,000 check.
Well, I forgot about that one. Yeah. I forgot to make a point.
Commissioner Sweet, I'll trade you that $58 check from our payments here on the Board of Forestry. I think any of that for that.
We'll give it all back if that'll help.
Well, Chair
Yamamoto,
yes, as Commissioner Kelly should note, though, that we had to share that $54 with the other districts. And I should say, for many years on our 7,422 acres, we received 0. And then I started complaining about it, and we got $54, and then we got 50-some thousand. Now we're scheduled back to 0, I believe. Don't quote me on that one. But we haven't had a ups and down budgeting problem because we haven't had any resource from those trust lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Main. Brenda McComb. Brenda, didn't I see your hand raised? Sorry.
It wasn't me, Commissioner Yamamoto.
I'm sorry. Very good. Any other questions, thoughts? Thank you very much for bearing with me through that one. So we're getting, well, no, we're still behind schedule. So let's go back to the Board of Forestry. March Board of Forestry topics: Endangered Species Management Plan with Nick Palazzaro. Nick, yeah, there you are.
Well done on the pronunciation. Okay, let me see if I can get the right screen up. You should all be looking at a soothing picture of a murrelet.
Looks like a marbled murrelet. Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Chair Yamamoto, members of the commission, or committee rather. For the record, my name is Nick Palazzaro. I currently serve as the Resource Support Unit Manager in State Forests. Prior to taking this job about a month ago or less, I was the staff wildlife biologist for the division. And so today I'll be presenting an update on development of an endangered species management plan for marbled murrelets. And I'll be presenting this to the board at their meeting on March 9th. So apologies to board members here who are going to have to listen to it twice. And at that time, I'll be providing a recommendation on our agency-defined role in the conservation of marbled murrelets in Oregon. Let me see if I can get this to work. Here we go. Okay. So for some quick background and context, in July of 2021, the Fish and Wildlife Commission voted to uplist the marbled murrelet from threatened to endangered under the State Endangered Species Act. And the uplisting of the murrelet to endangered sets in motion a series of actions that must be taken by the Commission, ODFW, ODF, the Board of Forestry, and other affected agencies. Most notably is the development and approval of this Endangered Species Management Plan. And if I call it the ESMP, that's what I'm referring to. So state land managers have 18 months to develop and submit their endangered species management plan to the commission, who then has 6 months to approve it. And the process of both development and final approval is required to be, by statute, to be completed within 2 years. It's important to note that the State Endangered Species Act only applies to state land owning and managing agencies, and it does not apply to federal, private, county, or tribal lands. And also important to note, at the time of listing, the commission adopted mandatory survival guidelines that apply unless an agency has a commission approved ESMP or an incidental take permit. The guidelines are what the commission considers necessary to ensure the survival of individual members of the species in the absence of an endangered species management plan. And the division has been implementing these requirements following their adoption as mandatory. Next slide. Is that the right one? Yeah, so within 4 months of the listing decision, the commission is required to determine if state land can play a role in the conservation of the endangered species. State landowning or managing agencies that the commission determines can play a role must develop these ESMPs. And at its meeting in November, the commission identified ODF as an agency that manages marble murrelet habitat in Oregon and thus can play a role in conservation of the murrelet. And so now the next step for the division is to determine the role for state forest lands in conservation of the species. And as defined in statute, conservation here means the use of methods and procedures necessary to bring a species to the point at which such measures are no longer necessary. The role of an agency may include, but is not limited to, conservation as defined, a contribution towards conservation, or take avoidance. And each agency is granted considerable discretion in determining the role that its lands can play, and in making this determination must balance several factors consistent with the biological aspects of species management identified by ODFW and the statutory and constitutional obligations of the agencies, including the land's statutory purpose. Thus, the division's obligated to balance the statutory requirements applicable to the management of state forests, the social and economic impacts that conservation would have on the state, the conservation needs of the species, and the purpose of the land and the roles of other ownership categories when determining the role that state forest lands can play in conservation. Where am I? Okay. So for the purpose of developing an endangered species management plan within the framework of the current forest management plan, and I'll explain why we're doing that in a minute. But to that extent, the division is proposing to define the role of ODF managed lands as a contribution to conservation of marble murrelets. This contribution to conservation is designed to support stable or increasing population and habitat trends by protecting occupied habitat and improving habitat conditions. And it's based on our existing take avoidance policies and other commitments under the current forest management plan. Is that the right slide? Yeah, that's the right side. The division's marble murrelet policies and current forest management plan, in conjunction with the survival guidelines, the mandatory guidelines, provide a substantial contribution to the conservation of the species. The policies are our approach to take avoidance under the current forest management plan, with a focus on protecting occupied habitat. The policies themselves are largely aligned with ODFW's mandatory survival guidelines, and we're taking measures to implement the requirements therein that are additive to our existing policy. Taken together, these policies and survival guidelines represent more than just measures for compliance with the state and federal Endangered Species Acts. They also represent a contribution to conservation, since protection of occupied habitat helps ensure that we are not contributing to further population or habitat declines. The current FMP, Forest Management Plan, is designed to protect and maintain and enhance native wildlife habitats with an emphasis on promoting habitat for species associated with mature and old growth forests. The FMP establishes targets for layered and old forest structural conditions. And these stands are then placed in a landscape design that's intended to provide for large areas of interior habitat. The FMP also has requirements for retention of old growth, leave trees and harvest units, and riparian management areas, or management of riparian areas for mature forest conditions. And not all of these strategies will result in marble murrelet habitat everywhere, but the FMP nonetheless represents a substantial contribution to conservation beyond just the take avoidance strategies. Okay, next slide. Within 18 months of listing, as I mentioned earlier, which is by January 16th of 2023, so next January, the division is required to develop and approve an endangered species management plan and submit that plan to the commission for their review and approval. The commission is then given an additional 6 months to review the submitted plan to determine whether the plan achieves the role defined for the land. And based on the biology of the species, the commission may modify the plan if necessary to be consistent with the role defined for the land. And then they must approve, as I mentioned, that plan within 24 months, which is by July 16, 2023. These statutory timelines require the division to proceed with development of this ESMP while working on the Habitat Conservation Plan and its associated forest management plan. The timelines don't quite overlap, and thus the ESMP will align with the current FMP, as I said earlier, which is not connected to an incidental take permit. It's important to note that a commission-approved ESMP for the marble murrelet will supersede the survival guidelines, the now mandatory guidelines for the species. So those are in place until you get an ESMP. And also, however, that an incidental take permit issued by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service under the Federal Endangered Species Act would be recognized by ODFW as a waiver of any state protection measures or requirements otherwise applicable to the actions allowed under the federal permit. Thus, an HCP would also effectively supersede or more appropriately replace the Endangered Species Management Plan. Actually, I got to go back because I'm gonna leave it open for questions. Those are good. It's good question material. So our next steps, the division is, as I mentioned, recommending that the board approve the role of state forests as a contribution to conservation of the marble murrelet. We're proposing that it be as defined in the staff report and detailed therein, and based, as I said, on our existing take avoidance policies and other commitments under the current FMP. We've also developed an outline for the content of the ESMP based on those requirements and those listed or those detailed in Oregon Administrative Rule. And the division is requesting feedback from the board on this proposed framework at the March meeting. The feedback will then be incorporated during development of the Endangered Species Management Plan. And so we'll be there March 9th. We are then also providing a status update in July of 22 this year. And then the final draft has to go to the board for approval in November of this year so that we can submit it to the Fish and Wildlife Commission in January. And that's it. We'll take questions.
We have questions for Nick?
David, this is John. I have one.
Sure.
Two, maybe. Nick, has the department or the Board of Forestry considered pushing back on ODF's decision, ODF&W's decision to uplist? You know, according to information received during the hearing, an uplisting was to be justified by two things. One, a threat of extinction of the species or some part of the species, and two, serious damage or trends of damage to the bird's habitat. I don't know how they could claim it was in threat of extinction. The department had what they termed statistically relevant numbers to show that the population of the Murrelet was averaging 2% a year increase for the last 19 years. So you're really talking about 40–50% increase in numbers in the last roughly 20 years. You look at a map and you set aside, take out of our western forests, the land that's been set aside for bird habitat. That I think would include the rogue siskiyou, would include the Siuslaw National Forest, would certainly include the Elliott. Not much harvest going on there. It would certainly include a good part of the Wagon Road lands and the ONC lands. You add it up, it's over 3 million acres that have been taken out of harvest for habitat. And the quality of that habitat is improving each year. These birds like big old trees, and they're getting bigger and older every year. So I had a hard time fathoming why they uplisted the bird, but do we have any rights of pushing back on that uplisting rather than just altering our habitat, you know, our forest management practices? We're taking revenue away from you, from us, and from the rest of the state by imposing harvest restrictions.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Sweet. So I'm not our legal policy analyst. I wish Justin were here because he could speak to whether we have the right or not. But as we were, you know, and we've discussed, you know, sort of what are we required to do with DOJ. The bottom line is there's a statutory requirement for this plan to be created. Now that they made the decision, it triggers this. There's a clock ticking, and so kind of regardless of what arguments we'd like to make in favor of adopting it or not, we still have to produce this thing by January of 23 or put ourselves in legal risk. So that's where we've been operating from, and have not addressed the, you know, the trends which were the basis for their decision, and the trends are thought to be positive for both the population and habitat. Habitat, particularly on federal and state lands, appears to have a positive trend. They pointed to be clear, they pointed to other environmental factors, ocean conditions, risk of catastrophic fires, and the inadequacy of state and federal regulatory programs, in part because the survival guidelines at the time were advisory. So that was the basis for their decision. I can't speak to whether that was misguided or not. So it's really not my role. My role is to make sure we get that plan done within the time frame that we're legally required by law. No, that's not a particularly satisfactory answer. I see Mike.
Well, I understand your answer totally. And I appreciate the position you're in.
Chair Yamamoto.
Oh, go ahead.
Hold on just a moment, Commissioner Main.
Thank you.
We do have Michael Wilson with his hand up. Michael?
Yeah, I was just going to confirm that, you know, as an agency, we do not have any authority to push back on the commission decision. You know, their decision is what it is. And Nick's right, we just have to kind of maintain the schedule and maintain compliance with statute. And really where we're trying to work is within in defining that role. And statute does recognize the roles of the various types of state land that might be involved, and that there are other statutes out there that govern that. And so we're trying to stay squarely within our context of GPV and the recognition that we have to produce, you know, outputs other than just murrelet habitat.
Thank you, Michael. Commissioner Main.
Yes, Chair Yamamoto. I was curious in thinking back about the earlier presentation about the disastrous fires we've had, and then this presentation on endangered species. So when we have a massive fire, obviously it wipes out almost everything for a while. Is the overlay for, let's say, murrelets, spotted owls, etc., wipe clean and we start over? How does that work?
So Nick, you are muted.
Yeah, so generally, you know, so like with the Santium as an example, in the recent fires there where we had existing owl sites, no, it doesn't start over. You do start your habitat assessment over. So you take stock of what is our current habitat situation, and where there are circumstances where there may be no more habitat. We have had some guidance from the Federal Fish and Wildlife Service that, hey, if it's not habitat, it's probably not a site anymore. But we still have to go through those processes, and it may entail in many cases where there are habitat, where there is habitat, continuing our survey program to make sure our timber sales are clear and expending those funds, et cetera.
I understand. I was just thinking about harvesting all the burned timber before it becomes unusable. And obviously in the first couple of years, it doesn't seem like there would be any sort of habitat or any sort of sites for those species. They would go somewhere else.
Yep, it's been a challenge to navigate that. We did have a couple of the salvage sales on the Santiam did occur in owl sites, and we just, you know, navigated them through our current policies and took them to the service and consulted with the Fish and Wildlife Service and got sign off. So we didn't make assumptions. Like, we didn't just say, there's no birds there, we don't even need to talk about it. We said, here's the circumstance. Do you guys agree that we can move forward with a low risk of take? And they did.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Any other questions? So I'll just add I just need to say that, you know, this was a very controversial decision by ODFW, one that really didn't seem to fit the criteria that were involved. But I have to agree, it is what it is at this point, and it was a tough one. It was a tough one. Okay, moving on in the agenda, Ftlac upcoming meetings and closing remarks. Kate, you have a few meeting issues to discuss, I believe.
So we had another topic there for the HCP FMP timeline.
I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. So we have the HCP FMP timeline update with Mike Wilson. Mike, I'm sorry, I forgot about that one.
Oh, that's perfectly all right. I was kind of hoping I'd get out of it. So thank you. I'll pop the timeline up here. And so thank you. Oh, actually, one thing I do want to say, because I heard it a couple of times, and I just want to reassure everybody of this is, you know, it wasn't the agency ODFW that uplisted. It was the commission. And I just want to let everybody know here that we actually have an extremely good working relationship with ODFW. And as part of that, we are very well coordinated with them in the development of the endangered species management plan, the timeline, the whole 9 yards. So we're very, as an agency, we're very happy with that relationship and there being a lot of help. To jump to the timelines here. So what I would like to do is perhaps let's start at the bottom and move to the top. I assume everybody can see this timeline. Let me know if you can. Yes. Okay, so where we are, there's a NEPA process going on, of course, and that began back in March of, very end of March, beginning of April of 2021. There was a public scoping and we released what's called an administrative draft of the HCP. During this entire time, it's been going through the draft EIS development. That draft EIS will be released on March 11th. There will be a 60-day public comment period. Here in April, on April 6th, there will be a federal public hearing, and this is part of their NEPA process, where they introduce the draft EIS, give an overview of it, and so forth. Now, we're going to talk about this, I believe, in a minute, and the upcoming schedule, but then for May 10th, it looks like we've landed on a date to have the board of have the NEPA contractor, which is ICF, come to a Board of Forestry workshop, present the draft EIS. The services will have a representative there as well, so we'll be able to answer questions around the draft EIS. And the desire there is to build that understanding. And then Ftlac will also be at that meeting, and there will be a chance to have questions and conversation and thoughts around that draft EIS to inform things going forward. And that is a special workshop that's going to happen that day. Then we will, as part of the summary of public comments from the public process that goes on with NEPA and with the HCP itself, which I'll get to in a second. It's going to take us some time to collate and summarize those comments. We will be coming back to the board in September with the HCP and the comments that go along with it and all kinds of other input that have come along during the process, and looking for that direction on moving forward into the final EIS process. Looking to have a final EIS in January of 2023, followed by publication of that of a record of decision in the Federal Register in February. And then on the heels of that come the actual issuance of incidental take permits. The way that translates into the HCP is, again, the admin draft has been out there for a while. When the draft EIS is published in the Federal Register on March 11th, also the public draft of the HCP will be. It's very similar to what has been seen thus far and has been the basis for what's in the draft EIS. There's been some clarifications around some things. And so we have submitted the applications for incidental take permits, which allows this to happen and get that public comment period going as well. During this time, we do continue to work with the scoping team to make minor clarifications. And unless different direction is given in September, then that HCP would go forward. If there's a desire for some sort of adjustments to the HCP, then that kind of changes this timeline until we get to that final HCP, which comes out of the final EIS. There is no approval process associated with the final HCP on our end. Basically it is what it is, and the decision on incidental take permits being issued is a federal decision. What there is, however, after all of that happens, there is a piece here where the board then will either direct the state forester to implement the incidental take permits and HCP, implement the HCP in light of the incidental take permits, I suppose, or not. So that's the board decision at the end of this. On the FMP timeline, so in November, we brought draft goals. This March, we'll be bringing draft strategies. These strategies have not changed so far from what you've already been presented back in December when we released them. We received a lot of input, and we need to do a lot of internal work, both on our internal reviews and then also in summarizing that and bringing it forward. So we, rather than trying to make partial edits to strategies, we are moving forward. We'll be presenting the draft strategies and a summary of the input that we've received thus far to the board, and then continuing to work on that. We will be bringing a draft FNP that will reflect all these updates to goals, strategies, and also have the management approach and the rest of the document fleshed out in November. Meanwhile, we are also modeling, and we will bring those modeled FNP outcomes in January to the board. Then the board can, deliberate on those trade-offs, the potential different management options within that FNP. If everything goes as scheduled, then we hope to have a May decision by the board to 2023 to move the FNP into the rulemaking process, and then have board approval of that final rule in November. And the reason this takes so long is simply the process itself for rulemaking and then getting things together for the board and so forth. But anyway, November 2023, we hope to have the final FNP. And with that, I will see if there are any questions.
Sure, Banks.
No, sorry.
So there's one thing I see missing, but I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet. I'm going to reiterate my concern. So the last year of work on all of these projects is based off of information and modeling that occurred years ago. I still to this day do not believe that you will be able to provide the projected harvest and board feet that you promised to the counties and to your board in 2019 in order to continue with the HCP project. I'm just very concerned about the fact that you're basing the companion plans of the FNP and the HCCP off of data. I believe it is providing you a false sense of reality. I'm just trying to keep my comments short. Again, I feel like I've been pretty blunt and transparent. I think everybody can agree with that about my concerns this whole process. But during previous meetings, you stated that you would be providing new modeling on that HCP data. And that seems to be missing from this chart. Is that complete? And if so, when can the counties expect to see that information? And, granted, if it's not complete, I've never done a public information request prior to information or project completion, but I can definitely try if you're planning on sitting on that information and not sharing it with the counties immediately upon completion. So I'm really interested on the fact that we are just progressing right along with all of this, and we are still modeling everything off of data over 2 years ago. And it just doesn't feel logical. It doesn't feel right. So anyhow, thanks.
So there is no new modeling to date. We will be modeling over the coming months in order to be able to provide modeled outcomes at the January 2023 board meeting. That was, and that in terms of department adjustments and department awareness, we will have that before then, and you will see that before then. That is a January agenda item. And so those will certainly be on the, I would assume, December FTLAC meeting as well. But in order for us to have the time to do our complete master, what we call our model solution reviews with the districts, and to get eyes on those to make sure they appear to be implementable, we do need that time to be able to do that.
So what you're saying is you're going to have the modeled FMP data, the modeled HCP data, the final HCP all happen in the same month. And we're going to have 5 minutes to look at it before it goes to the Board of Forestry.
I would assume that it's more than 5 minutes, but yes, we will be bringing quite a lot in January of 2023. I guess the modeled outcomes piece of the FNP is part of the board's deliberation and discussion in terms of what they see coming out of this FNP with an HCP policy overlay as part of our ESA compliance mechanism, or as our ESA compliance mechanism, that allows them to provide additional direction to the department beyond the direction that they give on the HCP itself in September of this year.
So what happened to modeling the HCP the second time? I mean, we've been talking about this for I don't know how long. And you have, so that's just keeps being put off. And I'm just curious, that's a little frightening to me. And it's a little telling, but I would think that you would want that data modeled to be able to build off of with all of these other plans that you're creating.
So the data that will be brought, the data that what's being used to develop the draft EIS is based in the same data that that we had at the time to demonstrate those relative outcomes that you saw in the comparative analysis. It's also being used to frame up whatever the alternatives are that they are looking at.
I guess, you know, I would expect more efficiency than using data from the time of 2017 to 2019. A lot has changed since then, a lot. Even the HCP itself in the NEPA process has changed since then because you guys have been entering edits this entire time. So I am interested to see it. And I obviously lack patience for it. And I also am struggling with how very unrealistic this entire process has been, just in a management perspective. I would never do this in a private business. And so I don't understand how this is happening in our state, that you are basing decisions off of so far in the past. I'm just gonna let other people make comments now.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. Bodie.
Yeah, thanks, Bodie Dowding, FMP project lead. I just wanted to add, when Mike said there were no changes to the strategies, that is true. We did not change any of the wording, but we did receive a lot of feedback on concern about the order of the strategies. And so we put language at the beginning of the strategies saying that they were not in order of importance. And then we ordered them by GPV value to group them into like categories, basically social, economic, and environmental, and they're alphabetical after that. And so that was to try and address some of the concerns. And I know particularly this group wanted to see timber listed first. We opted to list them and specifically call out that they were not listed in order of importance, try and group them in like groups, but make them alphabetical. So, you know, probably not everything you wanted to see, I know, but it was a change that was made based on a lot of concern that we heard.
Commissioner Banks.
I'm just full of reactions today. Why? So this is going to come across probably pretty forceful, and I apologize for that. But why are you guys talking to us? You're obviously not taking anything that we ask, say, want, request, thought processes into consideration. It's almost as if like that. It's a struggle. It's a struggle to sit here and be told to take it. It's a struggle to sit here and watch my community have to take it when you're done. It's a huge emotional struggle. And I don't want to see the potential of what's going to happen in my county. And so I guess that's why I throw, I think, these little mini hissy fits every now and again, is just because I'm not sure who you're trying to please. I'm not sure who you're trying to make, like, I'm not sure who it is I need to talk to other than this group here to bring about a thought process or something a little bit more realistic. And I mean, we obviously gave you some very deep concerns in our last meeting, and I don't feel like you put them in alphabetical order. This is me disgusted. I'm disgusted.
Thank you, Commissioner. I feel your pain. Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Weiss.
I just want to say thank you to Michael and the other staff. I know their job is not easy. I think they have just sat here and listened to some pretty harsh words, and I understand that commissioners are upset. And I think perhaps those commissioners would be well served by reaching out. You know, I know we have a lot of other important business to get through, and our meeting time is almost over. So I just wanted to say this is a difficult process, and I appreciate both sides of it. And I do appreciate the staff coming here and updating us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Carla Chambers. Carla.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. One of the criteria here is the social and economic impact. And my question to Nick and to Michael that I think might benefit the counties, and it's also going to benefit, you know, us on the Board of Forestry. One of the questions I asked at the last board meeting, or when we discussed the HCP, and NOAA Fisheries, I know is working on the economic impact to the counties, and I know they've reached out to the counties. I don't think we've seen that work yet, or if we have, I haven't seen it. So I'm going to be very interested in that NOAA Fisheries response on the economic impact to the counties, but I also ask, what will be the economic impacts to state lands? So state lands is a self-funded entity, and I assume that if there's a revenue downgrade to the counties, there will also be a substantial revenue downgrade to state lands. And I want to know the economic impact and job loss there as well. So what is that? That's a criteria, and I think it would be helpful for the counties and for state lands and the Board of Forestry. You know, if we all take an economic hit here, it's going to be very beneficial for us to understand how is that social and economic criteria and impact, how is it weighted in this decision? And I know that's a big question, but that's certainly one that Nick and Michael, I want really well answered at the next meeting when we discuss this.
Thank you, Carla.
Excuse me,
Michael, go ahead.
Yamamoto, I guess I'm in terms of how is it weighted. So first of all, it will be, I'm described in the draft EIS and then the final EIS is the socioeconomic impacts. And those impacts to the department as well as the local taxing districts and counties will be pretty apparent. When you say understanding of how it's being weighted, I think, that discussion is with the board in terms of those trade-offs and making those decisions and providing that direction.
Thank you, Michael. Courtney, last question. We are running over time. Go ahead.
So my ask is when you get this modeling complete, will you release it to the counties once it's complete? I mean, I don't need to wait for a meeting. I would love to have that information immediately. So what I would like is today to see some confirmation that once that modeling data is complete, that you release it to the counties, that you release it at least to Clatsop. I'm asking for Clatsop right now, but I'm sure the other counties would also appreciate that modeling data.
And so we will, we have in the past always been transparent in the modeling as well. And so once it has been through the sufficient internal review that we're comfortable that the results are the best that that modeling effort can do, then yes, we will be sharing those data.
Okay, any other questions, concerns, since we're over time? Thank you, everyone. So Kate, I'm going to turn it back over to you for upcoming meeting changes.
Okay, thank you. I will get us out of here quickly. So you might have saw your calendars got updated with the March meeting being canceled. The timing of that meeting was after the March Board of Forestry meeting. So I'm not sure how that all came about, but we canceled it. And we will be working to find a date for an April meeting. And what that April meeting will be talking about is the HCP, draft HCP, draft EIS. And then following the April meeting, you saw on Mike's timeline, May 10th, there's a Board of Forestry workshop. And that'll give the board a chance to look at the draft EIS. We will have a representative of the services there, as well as ICF doing a presentation. And it'll give the board the opportunity to dig in and ask questions about that draft HCP and EIS. And so at that time too, after the board's workshop or at the same meeting, FTLAC has been invited to participate in a conversation with the board about the draft EIS and the HCP. And we're kind of calling it a facilitated conversation just so we can all stay focused. Since it'll be about, I think we have about 4 hours for the full meeting. That includes the presentation to the board and all those kind of things. And so we'll be able to have some time talking back and forth about what we see in the draft EIS and HCP.
Perfect. And Kate, we've talked about this. It is my sincere hope that we're able to meet in person in May. I know everything's still up in the air, but that would be a great accomplishment if we could do that. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. Will that meeting on May 10th, will other commissioners besides the delegates, the representatives from the counties be invited to attend and participate?
I think at this point, it's going to be the FTLAC reps. And the reason I say that is because I'm trying to, as Commissioner Yamamoto said, is if it's in person, trying to figure out some logistics of where we'll be at that point and working through those details.
Sure
so
thing.
More to come. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
Hang in there with us, Leanne. We're trying to do this the best we can moving forward. We are. Okay, any other comments about our scheduling for the next couple of months? I'm not going to go through any closing remarks since we are over time. I do want to thank all the Board of Forestry members that were here today. Appreciate that very much. I think it really shows some commitment for the Board of Forestry members to spend their time at these FTLAC meetings. It just really gives you a much better idea, I feel, than the 15 minutes of testimony or written testimony that we can give. It gives you a real feel for the concerns and questions that this body has. So anyone with anything for the good of the order? Hearing none, time being 4:40 p.m., I will adjourn this FTLAC meeting. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much.
Thank you.